All right, we're ready to perform our demo. Let me show you my setup first. These are my 4 SQL servers. 2 SQL Server TBS Charlotte Prod and TBS Prod belongs to one cluster, and SQL Prod 1 and SQL Prod 2 belongs to another cluster. Let me show you real quick. This is my secondary cluster called 2016 cluster right here, and you can see the node SQL Prod 1 and SQL Prod 2. Let me show you the other one. This is my primary cluster, 2016 production cluster. The difference is there is a prod word in the naming convention right here. So TBS Charlotte Prod and TBS Prod, these both are part of this cluster. So we'll set up a distributed availability group that will go across these two clusters. So I have already copy pasted all this into SQL Server Management Studio, and we'll perform that there. Let's go there. And this needs to be performed on TBS Charlotte Prod. Excuse me. If you notice that right now I'm going to click on to connect with TBS Charlotte Prod, and this is our first step: create AG group with automatic seeding on primary replica. If you notice right here, the seeding mode is automatic. This is the requirement of a distributed availability group. So let's go ahead and create that. Command completed successfully. Let's take a look that if we have a availability group, refresh this, expand that, and as you can see that we have auto seed AG1 cluster primary. This is one group, and let's take a look on the database. North America _ sales. This database I have prepared already to be part of AG. You need to take full backup and transactional log backup, even though that backup will not be used, but that's the requirement of adding any database into availability group. Now the second step up here, it says perform joining on secondary replica before running this command, which means that we need to join all the secondary of this cluster, all the secondary replicas of this cluster that we want to be part of this AG group. I will connect, in my case it is TBS Prod. This is my secondary replica, and I need to join this replica. Let me show you real quick right now. As you can see, TBS Prod has a little red arrow right here. That means it hasn't joined. So this is also another requirement of distributed availability group, that you need to join, manually join your secondary replicas, since this is auto seeding is on. So let's run this, and command completed successfully. Let's refresh this and see that if this red arrow goes away. As you can see, it went away, and we'll go on our secondary and see if everything looks okay. Refresh this and open it. Here it is. This is secondary, and database look healthy. So what we did, our first step to create the availability group with auto seeding and join the secondary servers to that particular availability group. Our next step is, let's go ahead and create the listener for this particular group. I'm gonna go back to my primary, and as you can see that we performed this. I just put it out here just to make sure that we perform those steps before we move forward, because you have to go back and forth between different servers, just like I am going. So I just put a little comment out for me to follow really the sequence. Now we're ready to add the listener. As you can see right here, my listener IP is 86, and cluster 1 _ listener. This cluster 1 means my primary cluster. I just named it that way so that we know the difference between cluster 1 and cluster 2 when we create the distributed availability group. Let's create the listener now. All right, let's go ahead and run it. It's going to take a little bit of time because it's going to Active Directory and creating this computer object cluster underscore listener 1. Alright, our listener is created. Let's take a look if it is created. Right here is cluster 1 underscore listener. Now we have to do the same thing on secondary cluster. This is not the secondary replica, but the secondary cluster, which means we are going to deal with SQL prod 1 and SQL prod 2 in my case. So let me connect with the SQL prod 1 and perform the same thing. I'm creating availability group AutoSeed AG cluster 2 with seeding underscore mode automatic. Click execute, and it's created successfully. Let's take a look. I'm going to minimize these two servers. Let's get these two servers ready for our distributed availability group. Refresh it. And here it is, AutoSeed AG cluster 2. So let me expand that and let me take a look on replica. As you can see, the secondary replica hasn't joined, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's go ahead and run on SQL prod 2, which is my secondary in this secondary cluster, and join that. Keep in mind that I'm creating this availability group without any database, because I'm expecting my primary cluster to distribute that database to this group. If you notice right here, I am not giving the database name. If you want to give the database name, that will not be used in this setup. So let's go on secondary of this secondary cluster, which is SQL prod 2, and I'll run this. Command completed successfully. Let's refresh this and see that if a secondary replica has joined. As you can see, that red arrow is gone and it has joined. Now our next step is creating the listener. So let's go back to our primary replica of secondary cluster, which is SQL prod 1 in my case. I'm going to go back and get the script from here, because it gave me error a little bit ago. Alright, let's go ahead and create the listener for this group. Execute. Alright, command completed successfully. Let's take a look on the listener side. And listener is created successfully. And now our both clusters are ready for our distributed availability group, and we will get into creating a distributed availability group on the primary cluster right here. This is my primary replica of primary cluster. We will create a distributed group. So I'm going to go back to the connection of Charlotte prod, which is primary, and this is just note to myself, if secondary cluster is ready, please proceed to create the distributed availability group. One thing you notice that during my previous conversation that now when we create the distributed, in my case it's AG underscore distributor, when we create this group, we use listeners of, we just created separate listeners for both, for all these 4 servers, or I should say for these 2 clusters, and we will add that to create one distributor that will use these listener endpoints right here and communicate with each other. So failover mode is manual right here, failover mode up here is manual, and seeding mode is automatic. And right here, let's go and create this AG underscore distributor group. Or somehow this either the listener name is not right or the availability group is not right. Let me check availability group, AutoSeed AG cluster 1, AutoSeed AG cluster 1, and listener is, there's no T in here. Let me check real quick on this. AutoSeed AG cluster 2, and the T is not here. So now we'll run the command and see what kind of error we get. Command completed successfully. As you can see, after refreshing availability group, there would be another availability group called AutoSeed AG cluster 1 and AG underscore distributor. So this is essential. This is the one that does the job for us. And now, since we have created this onto this secondary using, this is our primary replica of primary cluster. We need to go on our primary replica SQL prod 1 of secondary cluster to join that particular server to this availability group. If you notice right here, let me open up the replicas for you. AutoSeed AG cluster 2, which is the secondary cluster right here, that is not joined. So we need to go onto SQL prod 1 and run that command to join in this availability group. So we go on SQL prod 1 again, and again this note right here, make sure distributed AG is completed on cluster 1. Now we're ready to run this. All right, let's run this command. It's completed successfully, and let's refresh this and see that if the red arrow is gone, as you can see that it has joined. So let's take a look on the databases. As I mentioned, that AG underscore distributor doesn't do anything, but it helps us to communicate and does our distribution. If you wanted to, if you're interested to know the databases, and if you want to add more databases, you need to have this availability group that you created. This is where you will know the health and everything. So if you notice that you can expand this, and this is our database that we would like to see it go across the different clusters. And in our case right here, let's refresh, and this has a different availability group, but this database should be part of it now. As you can see that we did not do anything, but availability databases North America underscore sales is here. So let's go and refresh the databases and see if it's synchronized. It's synchronized here. Let's take a look on the secondaries of all of these servers. So this is my primary, so I'm gonna go, this is my secondary. As you can see that, let me go and expand the databases, refresh it, and see if it's synchronized. So as you can see, this is synchronized on the secondary of our primary cluster. Now we will go and secondary of the secondary cluster and see if that is synchronized. Refresh it, and as you can see, North America underscore sales right here is synchronized. Now let's go back to our document real quick. We'll go, we performed all these steps, and it says right here, the note, wait till all is synchronized. We just made sure that everything is synchronized. Now just for our testing purposes, we wanted to see that if we add the more databases into the availability group that was created with the AutoSeed, whether it works or not, whether it goes across all the secondaries of primary cluster, and well, basically all those 4 servers. Let me put it that way. So in my demo, database called test sync. This is my database. All I'm doing is creating it and preparing it to add into our existing availability group. So what I'll do, I'll take the backup. Click OK. Take transactional log backup so we can add that into our availability group. Okay, now it's ready to be added into our availability group. This is my primary replica. This is where you need to add it, and this will flow to the secondary of this cluster and primary and secondary of the other cluster. So let's right click and add the database. This is just normal what you are used to adding the database if you are using graphical user interface. As you can see that the test underscore sync meets the requirement. I'm going to select this. Click next, and we're going to click on join only. Keep in mind, we have not initiated this database on any other server, just we took the backup, full backup, and transactional log backup. So click next and click connect to the secondary of this particular one primary cluster. Click next and next again and finish. Alright, as you can see that it has joined. If you remember that in SQL Server 2014, we used to initialize everything on the secondary servers before we could join this, but since it is with the AutoSeed automatic, it'll do its job. So click close, and now let's take a look on the secondary of this server. This cluster, I should say. Test, it's synchronized. I'm going to refresh the database right here. Everything looks good. Now let's take a look if it has gone to the next cluster. And I'm going to refresh this. Sometimes it takes time. The last time when I did that myself, it took about 5 to 10 minutes, just an empty database, to go across the cluster. It is because my machines are not really beefy, but if your machines and network is beefy, it'll be real quick. But right now it's not there yet.